Hello, this is Betamax80 on a lovely late March day, very sunny. If you hear a rattling noise, I have a fan on in the background. It's necessary today. It's lovely for March. So this is possibly the first of my new style videos, I suppose, about a subject other than computing. This is a video about my autism assessment. First of all, I'm going to mention a second book. It's something I'm reading again as part of my sort of understanding of my working diagnosis, but I highly recommend this one. It wasn't expensive really, the way that these books can be. This was £12.50 on Amazon. I believe it's available as a Kindle book as well, not an audio book, but also as an audio book on Audible, I believe. And also available as a Kindle book, I believe, but I have the physical copy here. Easiest to just pick up and grab, I find. Fantastic job. It mentions that it's work related, I suppose, but I'm actually finding that it covers many aspects. It centres around the workplace, but as an adult, I find that a lot of these factors apply to me generally in society. So yeah, interesting. Sort of about other people's perceptions of you, how you can counter those perceptions, how you can explain yourself to people. But there's an important difference in explaining yourself to adapting who you are. And yeah, it's very difficult to adapt who you are as somebody with autism. That generally is something that you're forced to do. Can only be done for a very short period of time and is absolutely exhausting. For example, at the end of every working day, if it's a 9 to 6 job, for example, let's be realistic, it won't be 9 to 5, 8 till 5, 9 till 6, something like that. I assure you, but by the time I've actually come home, I need to sleep. And if there's a travel aspect involved that's quite significant, it's going to be an hour and a half to 2 hours. I have to sleep right away. I can't cook, I can't do anything, I have to close my eyes. Sometimes I need to get myself a coffee from a coffee shop just to finish the journey home, literally just to keep functioning long enough to get home. Sometimes needs like an intake of sugar, an intake of caffeine, because otherwise I can't promise that I'll even make it back. I could literally fall asleep on the spot potentially, the way I feel. It's very difficult because it means that I generally don't eat until 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, which is difficult on a working evening, but that is real life and that's how I function. All covered in the book. So the main crux of this video, 3 minutes in, is that I wanted to talk about how I got my diagnosis, because I've had a lot of people ask me that within the autism community. This is where I have to thank my lucky stars in a strange, odd kind of way that I actually made a start on a nursing degree course at university, specifically a learning disabilities branch nursing course. I use the air quotes because I don't really like the term. It feels like it's a term from a generation ago, but it's the term that's being used to this day, so I have to use it. Anyway, part of that involved a placement where a day's worth of Autistic Spectrum Disorder training was offered to student nurses. I actually went on 2 of these training days. I had the opportunity and yes, heard it discussed in different ways. I found myself taking some notes because an awful lot rung true to me, not from things I've seen in other people, although of course that was something I could understand and agree with. There was some give and take there, but literally to me, things I was doing, things I was struggling with, aspects of operating within normal society that I struggle with, ways of understanding people that I just wasn't managing, things that are implied, for example, go completely over my head if it's not literally said to me or not literally written down. You can assume that I have never been told it, I have never picked it up, and I do not know it's something that exists, something you do, or something you're supposed to know. It's that simple. You cannot assume I know it if I haven't read it or been told. strange, but there we go. That's an ASD. Pretty standard trait, actually. So we have these series of notes which I've taken from the ASD training, and about 70% of what's talked about applies to me personally. From what I understand, and what I get told all the time by all kinds of people, everybody's on the autistic spectrum to some degree. Yes, okay, I can agree with that. The autistic spectrum assessment is a very wide-ranging assessment, and there are some parts of life that people just don't get on with brilliantly, but there are other parts of life where people do absolutely fine, and in many cases make up for the deficit in that small area of life they don't get on with too well. An ASD diagnosis is really what peels back the layers with someone, and this is where the clinician, through the diagnostic form they choose to use, actually sort of shows up the fact that there are more sort of, I almost said flawed. I'm not going to say flawed because there's no point being negative about this. It's not going to change, and it doesn't mean that we can't think for ourselves. It doesn't mean I can't operate perfectly well. It doesn't mean I can't speak for myself. Listen to me speaking at the moment and look at my prior videos. You get me interested in a subject and I can speak for myself. Don't you worry about that. But basically, what I was trying to get at is that there are differences in my understanding that are more than your average occasional blip in understanding. They're much more universal, I suppose. I think that's a good way to summarise things. Back to where I was going previously. How did I get my assessment? Well, I took my notes while at the training day. I booked an appointment with my GP. I took my notes to the GP. He looked at them. He said, I can see your point. I'm going to make the referral. He sent my notes along with the referral to the diagnostic centre. They picked this up. I had an appointment around 2 weeks later. This was for a very short exercise. I nearly said a form filling exercise, but they're specific diagnostic forms. They're not general medical history forms, not like that. They are diagnostic forms. Do you ever struggle with this? Is this something that you find happens to you? Do you feel like you're not fitting into a situation? This kind of thing. I believe it was 2 forms, both short, both 10 questions each. But on that basis, it was understood that I would be a valid referral for a full diagnostic appointment. This is what took a very long time to come around. This is unfortunately where the NHS underfunding in mental health services comes to the fore. I had a 5-month wait for my full diagnostic assessment, and I understand this isn't too bad. They quite often take years. I've heard a year to 2 years being quite usual, so be prepared for that. I didn't get fantastic feedback when I actually called up to ask for an update. I pressed stop. I'm just going to carry on. So making the occasional call to the service might be worthwhile, and I think it does just keep your name at the front of maybe the medical secretary's mind. Never a bad thing. So finally I got the letter for the diagnostic assessment, and they ask for a member of family or a close friend to come along with you. And it's not just for moral support. What happens, as far as I can tell, is that they are asked exactly the same set of questions as you, and there are 2 columns on the assessment form. So they're asked, do you find that he or she does this, struggles with this? Whereas they're asking you directly, how do you find this? Does this affect you? And the words are very carefully chosen. The questions are very open. And it's not guided questions. You're not guided towards an answer. They're completely open, and it's okay to not tick all of the boxes. That's not what the point is. The point is to explain your own circumstances, your own findings in life, and they do date back all the way to school. And if you remember anything from before school, the one very obvious trait for me, for example, was being very late to be able to tie my own shoelaces. With some people, it's been late to begin talking, for example, but me not being able to tie my shoelaces until 11 years old was an example of a very clear difference in developmental abilities, which was interesting. So you get the idea. So this assessment normally takes 2 hours. It took 3 hours for me, I think, because the psychiatrist could actually see enough relevance in what I was saying that he wanted to go slightly deeper with the investigation, to which I'm very grateful to him for, because this is very important. It's quite life-changing. So the appointment was with a consultant psychiatrist and an occupational therapist. The idea is that the appointment split between the two. The occupational therapist's interest is more in your day-to-day capability. So I would pretty much run through a day in my life. If my days vary, which they do sometimes, my work days compared to my normal days are very different. So I was asked to describe a work day where there are time pressures, for example. And I think a lot of information was gleaned from that. The two portions of the consultation are brought together. This is what I'm waiting on now. I was given a working diagnosis verbally by the psychiatrist because I presented quite clearly, I understand. I don't know if you would always have a working diagnosis or whether there would need to be some more processing of the forms involved. So I can't tell you to expect a working diagnosis. However, this was followed up with a letter to my GP that stated that yes, I did have an ASD diagnosis and that the report would follow in due course. For me, there was a 4-week timescale set for producing the forms. Unfortunately, there has been a delay of a week, so I'm still waiting on my diagnostic report. After the diagnostic report arrives, I should be called in for a follow-up appointment, which hopefully will give me some signposting to services which will benefit me, perhaps some literature to read rather than me relying on books that I'm finding myself. And then I can also ask for amendments to be made to the report if I feel it doesn't read very well to a potential employer, potential university admissions tutor, I don't know, but you know the sort of thing. A professional who has a right to expect access to this report. So it's really nice to be asked for my input. I appreciate that. So I'm still going through my diagnostic journey really, but I've had the major bulk of it in having had my diagnostic assessment. So I'm just going to summarise again. If it's at all possible to attend any kind of ASD awareness training while you're on a course of study or through your workplace, make sure that you book on it as a professional who's interested in finding out about ASD. Make sure you take plenty of notes. If you go to that assessment with that suspicion that's in your head that there may be some ASD involvement in how you present, make sure you take notes, think about how they might apply to you, take some side notes, something that would be presentable to your GP if you were thinking about a referral, and then go along to your GP with those notes. It's up to you as an adult to make that referral request, I think, unless things are extremely obvious and there's an extreme degree of danger, possibly, to yourself and others. It's really down to you to request that referral. Very, very helpful to have evidence, because as I understand it, the GP's response, if there is a negative response, would be, I don't have enough evidence to actually refer you with. So if you can make your own evidence, you'll find that things move faster for you, hopefully. There's a long waiting process. It's a very long, awkward waiting process, and believe me, I know that in that time, life can fall apart. Unfortunately, it's happened to me, and I'm sure it happens to a lot of people while they're waiting for that referral to become an assessment appointment. But keep hopeful, stay on top of it, ask the referring service, if it's your GP, contact your GP every so often. If you've gone through a diagnostic appointment, contact that centre. Whichever the latest place you've got a phone number for is, get hold of them, keep in touch, don't let it go. Took me 5 months, as I say. Waiting on the report is taking another month. This is not a long turnaround, as I understand. Stay positive. Perhaps start reading a little bit about ASD, but until you actually have the diagnosis, I find it's very hard to kind of commit to yourself to that future, let's say, to the future of having ASD before you've actually had that diagnosis. So, I hope this has been useful. I hope that if you are considering whether you have ASD and want to know more, you do find access to perhaps a professional ASD training session. I think that's a really good way forward. I understand these are very common in America. I'm afraid I haven't been in sort of a high-powered office workforce recently, so I don't know how common these yet are in the UK, but that's what I'd urge you to look for, and then start the ball rolling that way. Take care, and I'll upload another video soon. Hopefully the next one won't be split in half. Bye.